Okay, welcome to the first phoneword.org Registrar workshop. Today is Wednesday, April the 16th, 2014. It is approximately 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. GMT, and we welcome you to the first workshop. We're planning to have, excuse me, hey Brandon.
So I got an invite to be able to chat, but I didn't get an invite to a specific chat.
Okay. So let me send you share link. Okay. So I just send you another invite.
Okay.
Do you see that? Pardon me?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to hang up the phone.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay, so Brandon Mason will be joining us in a moment. Are you with us, Brandon?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Great. Thanks.
No worries.
Hello. Hello, welcome.
Mark Lancaster, AT&T.
Hey, Mark. Welcome.
Hi, Jay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Okay, so we have Brandon Mason on as well, who's working with us on the technical side. And Mark, are you in front of a computer?
Yes, sir.
Okay, awesome. If you wouldn't mind going to www.phoneword.org. Do you see a YouTube box there, Mark?
I sure do.
Okay, if you could go ahead and click on that, you should be able to see us. Mark, I assume, are you on Google Plus at all?
I am, but I'm not connected to that through my company computer. I have a personal account.
Okay, because we're actually doing a Google Hangout here, and we're going to be showing some slides. You'll be able to,
I can see your face at the moment.
you might want to mute your computer so that there's not feedback.
Got it.
So you'll be able to see the slides that we go through on the display there on the phoneword.org site, but there's going to be a bit of a delay. So it's about a 20-second delay or so. I apologize for that, but we'll just
I'm a little bit slow, so I think the delay will work to my benefit.
I know you better than that, Mark. Okay, so I think we're all together. Maybe a few more people will join us. This is just the first of a series of monthly workshops related to the partially related to the FCC numbering testbed workshop that occurred on March 25th, 2014 in Washington, D.C. And we're hosting these workshops as a way to get things started, and we're going to be having 2 workshops per month, one on the 3rd Wednesday of the month which is today, the 16th of April, and then one on the fourth Wednesday of the month, which the next one will be April 23rd. And the one on the third Wednesday of the month will be in the morning for folks in Europe and so forth, and then the one on the fourth Wednesday of the month will be in the afternoon. That'll hopefully accommodate people in other parts of the world, as well as people that might have had a conflict for the prior workshop. And they'll all be recorded. They'll all be on Google Hangouts, and as we pick up some momentum here, we'll have more people, and we'll start to stress the Google Hangout versus the dial-in audio conference bridge only. So I'll stop there. And Mark, do you have any questions before we get going?
No, sir.
Awesome. Has there been any? Have you seen anything from the FCC numbering workshop regarding a summary or anything like that, Mark?
No, I haven't seen that. We have expected something based on Henning Schulzrening's comments at the Nancy meeting on the 27th of March, but haven't seen that yet. And I think tomorrow would be 3 weeks, and he suggested that he would have something in 2 weeks. So we have heard that the ABIS annual meeting of their committees in Denver the first week in May has invited the FCC to have a second numbering workshop, numbering testbed workshop meeting in their conference if the FCC chose to do that. I haven't seen any response or heard anything mentioned about that at this point. I think in addition to that, the Industry Numbering Committee quickly put together some high-level requirements for the numbering test bed. I believe they did that on the 26th of March and sent them as an ex parte to the FCC. So those items might be of interest. They're kind of a genericized version of what we think a service provider would need to be able to do with a number in the future. And they give some basis that could be used in the policy area of the numbering test bed. Because at some point, despite Henning's assertions at the workshop on March 25th that we weren't going to talk about policy there, there will have to be some policy put into the test bed for it to be meaningful. So I think that was a good first step.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as you know, Mark, I've been involved with enum for over a decade now, and the policy part of, let's say, the whole picture really has been, in my view, one of the stopping points of enum, at least the end user opt-in enum that we're really talking about here now. And I totally agree with you that although it would be nice to have this as like a sanitized test bed that's technology only, you really have to have policy working with the technology. And in my opinion, you also have to have at some point a business model, because I've seen a lot of time and effort spent in crafting out standards and technology and so forth, but unless there's some sort of compelling business model behind it, it just sits there on the shelf.
I think it's an interesting proposal, potential proposal made by Comcast, which said in a future numbering working group meeting that they are considering establishing their own test bed. It's useful in that I saw at the testbed workshop that it was largely, I guess I'd say, chance for vendors to get specifications from the FCC and Henning, but also perspective from the service providers so that they could configure a testbed environment that might be a first step towards an actual contract for service. That Comcast has said that Comcast may bring up their own test bed, and as a service provider, they wouldn't, of course, qualify as a neutral party to provide that service ultimately, but they could use their test bed as a form of user specifications to whoever might eventually provide a test bed solution or a final solution when we get to that point. So I liked that angle to kind of give us some impetus. A database provider could look simply to a higher level interest, but we're going to have to get to something that's implementable and usable in actual service provider operations. And so I was kind of intrigued by Comcast's assertion.
Do you know if Comcast is planning to open that up to others, or are they just going to operate their own test bed sort of internally?
I don't think it was intended to be internally. If that were the case, I think they wouldn't have announced it to the group.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that they will be looking for partners to get their test bed connected with other parties to look at actual provisioning scenarios, but that's simply speculation at this point because we haven't seen any product from them or heard anything more than the conversations that they've made.
Mm-hmm. And just to kind of compare notes, it's my understanding that the proposed, let's say, test beds or test bed participants that are talking about setting up some sort of test bed are Newstar, iConnective, PhoneWord, and now Comcast. Are those basically the four in your understanding?
The only ones that I have seen in public forum suggest that they would have a test bed would be Newstar, who made a pretty clear depiction that they plan to do that on the phone call, and Comcast that said that they might. I don't know if you believe that PhoneWord has actually made a pronouncement, but if it's true, and I believe it's your intention based on other conversations you and I have had, that it would probably be useful to make that point a little bit more clear to the parties involved. I think, for instance, at the next Future of Numbering working group, that might be a useful comment to make. But I haven't seen that iConnective has actually said anything. In fact, I think at that workshop, they may not have even made a public comment. So while I believe that they would be interested in pursuing that route, I haven't heard them say that publicly.
They did post a filing, I think under proceeding 13-97 for sure, that indicated to me that they were looking at using, I believe, the LURG to as sort of their enum registry, so forth. And I guess
they had filed one that had 5 different scenarios in it. I think 2 or 3 of the scenarios were theirs, and others, I think an AT&T one was in there, and some other party. So if we accept that which was filed before the testbed meeting was a commitment to produce a testbed, I think that might be an extrapolation, but I don't doubt that they will.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Well, thanks for just kind of helping us get on the same page as in terms of what's so. And part of what the purpose of today's workshop is to communicate what phoneword.org is intending to do in a test bed, in starting to build a community, and that's basically what we're about today. So hopefully this session will communicate in a clearer fashion what the intention of phoneword is, phoneword.org, as a registry, setting up a registry, and I think that's a pretty good lead-in to our session today. Mark, I think I'm going to send you a link to a presentation, so hopefully you can follow along without the significant delay. So let's see if we can do this.
Is there any way for us to do just a screen share?
With Mark?
Yeah. Would it go to the YouTube?
I think in order to do that, Brandon, I think we would have to, he would have to be on Google.
On the Hangout?
Yeah, on the Hangout.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Let me, hang on.
Yeah, we might even consider that as an option if we don't have too many people. Putting everybody on a Hangout might be a better experience.
Yeah, let me see if I can change this to public, which would be appropriate. And Mark, this is Brandon Mason. He's working with us on the technology side. So, having a little difficulty. Share.
Where are you located, Brandon?
Sorry, it's muted. I'm out in Phoenix as well, so Jay and I are local here.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I just made this public, and I'm going to get let's see, Mark. Let's cancel that. Let's go into bear with me. I think we're going to be able to successfully get this to you, Mark, because there's a significant delay in this broadcast. Okay, slowly but surely.
Yeah, my concern is I think we've got a number of different docs we want to go over, and you know, sharing each one of those individually might be difficult.
Sure.
So if
Without a
we
doubt.
if we could get him invited just to straight to the Google Hangout, screen shares would make this a lot easier.
For sure. Mark, I just sent you a link to this presentation that we're about to go over. So hopefully you'll be able to open that up and follow along. Let me know if you've got it.
I do.
Awesome. And can you open it?
Internet Explorer did not like it. Hang on, let me try this again. Now it says that I cannot display the web page.
Do you happen to have Google Chrome?
Nah, they get pretty tight on the things that we can load.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll just hopefully you can follow along on the YouTube video. And let's see. Let's get this started. So I'm going to start the screen share. Okay, Brandon, can you see the presentation? Hello, Brandon.
Sorry, yeah, I can.
Okay, awesome. So this is the presentation to introduce the, well, not only phoneword.org, but also the Registrar workshops and what we're intending to accomplish with these workshops, which harkens back to, what you said earlier, Mark, about, it's at this point among the community, among the ecosystem, it's really not clear what PhoneWord is planning to do. And frankly, in the submission to the FCC, it was a non-binding, just simply indication of interest. And what PhoneWord indicated was that PhoneWord's interested in participating in the test bed. We're interested in, I believe, also the service experiments, because again, although it was sort of, there was an attempt to try to separate the service experiments portions of the transition, all IP transition initiative. In my view, the service experiments go hand in hand with the numbering test bed, and also goes hand in hand with the policy, and also goes hand in hand with the business models that might be associated with this. So phoneword.org, this is the first workshop, and what we're planning to cover today, just a brief agenda, is an introduction, which we've already been starting and proceeding in the introduction. We're going to talk about an overview. We're going to talk, Brandon's going to go through a technical discussion, and then we'll have questions and feedback, and then we'll talk about some next steps and milestones. So the whole, if I were to sum up what PhoneWord is about, PhoneWord.org, it is about opening up a new realm of empowerment at the edge. So what PhoneWord is about and what's possible is moving as much empowerment as possible to the edge. So what does that mean? That means that all of us that are now part and parcel with this new revolution of communications, of connectivity, of interaction, what would it look like if we really felt empowered around all these new devices, all these new services that are taking shape and being introduced at an unprecedented rate? And that's what I think is most compelling, at least to me, and most exciting in this whole endeavor, is pushing, giving me as a consumer, as an end user, as a registrant, the control over what my community sees, how they interact with me, how I have control, as well as some sort of new level of integration of all my disparate media communications methods and channels. So what would that look like? Well, it would look like basically starting with my phone number. What if my phone communication, my audio conversation was integrated with my social media, was integrated with my email communication, was integrated with my identity, was integrated in a new way, a new form that opens up a whole new experience for me as an end user. And not only me, but everybody. And what if it was simple? What if it was as simple as dialing something that looks like a telephone number? What if my grandmother could do it? And not only could she do it, not only could she get a new level of media experience, but what if it was secure? What if it was secure in a new way? And it was, so basically, simple, secure empowerment at the edge is really what PhoneWord.org is about. So I'll stop there. Any questions or comments about that? Okay, I'll go on to the next slide. The next part of this is PhoneWord.org is really about building a global community. So even though the numbering testbed workshop that took place on March 25th at the Federal Communications Commission was sort of a kickoff point, the opportunity here is really to expand beyond the bounds of what we've been traditionally confined to, which is geographic borderlines. And I think there's really a new opportunity to create something that's a global initiative, a global community, much faster than people would have predicted, 6, 8, 10 months ago. And I think we're seeing evidence of this global transformation happening in a quick fashion in other realms, such as WhatsApp. So we have reached out to some global communities, such as the nrenum.net global community, which is academic and research institutions that have an interest and an appetite in enum, in what's next, in dialable rich media, and they have expressed interest in the initiative that we proposed with phoneword.org, specifically around working with what's called virtual numbers, which is numbering that appears to be a telephone number, but it's really not a telephone number, and there is no working telephone number counterpart on the public switch telephone network. So part of the initiative with phoneword.org is to build a community that is as collaborative as possible, that is as global as possible, to create a whole new realm of what is possible. Any questions about that?
No.
Okay. The next is creating a new. So here is actually a Leonardo da Vinci painting of basically an infant. So it's something that's very old. So the public switch telephone network is a very old construct, and it has a lot of, let's say, legacy associated with it. But yet, I really think we have an opportunity to create something that's, in many respects, brand new, start from scratch, that can exist, let's say, side by side with the legacy ecosystem, but still gives us the freedom to create something brand new. And that's another key part of the phoneword.org initiative. So any questions about that?
I think we're good.
All right. So what are some specifics? Basically, phoneword.org is focusing on, in addition to creating a registry, also building a community of registrars. And those registrars are broken down into basically two primary categories: commercial registrars and sponsored registrars. Now, these workshops, the phoneword.org initiative, etc., is also interested in fostering and building a general participant community that can participate in these workshops, can review the workshops, and also participate in some form or fashion to move the phoneword.org initiative forward and facilitate a layer of registrars working together in a fashion that basically moves the whole initiative further and faster than would otherwise happen. So specifically, the commercial registrars, there's an invitation for entities interested in participating in the workshops as commercial registrars to subscribe to the workshops for a fee of $475 per month, which includes participating in 2 workshops per month, one on the 3rd Wednesday in the morning in North America, and one on the 4th Wednesday in the afternoon in North America. And it's simply a month-to-month commitment that allows participation at the level of a registrar. The focus, as Brandon will talk about, is to build an easy-to-use registrar API, or application programming interface, to the registry. The participation at the commercial registrar level involves creating 10 virtual phone word enums of the commercial registrar's choice, to start to experiment with. And so what do I mean by that? What do I mean by a phone word enum? Well, what I'm talking about is basically a virtual fully qualified domain name, and by virtual I'm talking about a fully qualified domain name, or what looks like a telephone number but it's really a fully qualified domain name, that in addition to the numeric sequence has some sort of phrase associated with those numerics. And, for example, it could be experimenting with a fully qualified domain name that looks like a +1, 100, and then XYZ carrier. So the fully qualified domain name could be presented in either its numeric form or its phrase or phone word form, so that it's, even though it looks like a telephone number, it starts to feel and act more like an internet domain. So the other thing that I think is key is that the phoneword.org is a completely bootstrapped initiative. So, why have, I would call it, a very modest fee of $475 per month for the initial 25 commercial registrars? Surely major carriers could afford much more than that. Well, the idea behind phoneword.org is to create a registry, create a community that is as, I'll call it, Swiss neutral as possible. So in other words, no one entity, be it a large company or a large institution, could be considered as having a major influence, either in terms of funding or in terms of decision making or so forth, within this initiative. And so the thought is, and the intention is, to make this as level a playing field as possible, to use a cliche. And that's part of what the proposal is around phoneword.org. And again, none of this is really carved in stone. Part of this workshop is to express some of these ideas and get some feedback, and then iterate from here and say, okay, people liked this part of it, of the phoneword.org proposal. They had some concerns about this part of it, and this part was not clear. So all of this, Mark, is to get back to what you said, that right now among the broader community, this phone word thing it's not really clear as to what it is, what it's about, how it works, who can be involved, what the intention is, all that sort of thing. So, any questions about that?
So I wonder, given the momentum that big vendors have, big telephone companies have, what is the hope for, and I imagine as a business owner, you have to ponder these kind of questions, but what is the hope for a startup, for a grassroots effort to gain traction in an environment that's dominated by AT&Ts and Verizons and Alcatels and big companies like Newstar and iConnective, plus with, as we saw at the numbering testbed workshop, others like Mozilla and Cisco potentially entering that kind of traditional telecom sector, how do you hope to have a kind of a smallish approach to solving what we've done usually with massive corporations?
Well, Mark, that's a perfect question because I mean, I'm sure that people have looked at what has been posted around PhoneWord and have totally dismissed it as well.
And I don't mean to be dismissive myself. I'm just curious, literally, how would that work? Because we've got, at least we have some movement with this testbed idea that the FCC has pushed forward. I think as an industry so far we have not come up with a way to meet each other because there's so many conflicting needs and revenue streams and things that will change as we go to an all IP environment. So we haven't been able to do it through any kind of a telecom initiated effort, and for the regulator to do it, it's an interesting idea and we will all pay attention, but we don't often ask the regulator for help in configuring our next business model. That's always a scary experience.
Right.
But if we can't do it of our own initiative, and we're curious how it will turn out if the regulator leads. Having another model is intriguing, but how much energy do you put behind that kind of an approach? How do we really make that happen? I mean, clearly we've got just 2 or 3 or 4 people on the call, and so there's not a stampede to your front door to say, let's make the grassroots effort work. So how does that happen?
Well, I think the key is creating step by step a set of use cases, value propositions, easy to use, let's say, testable elements for people to get involved with. And it is a big leap to think that, some little group of people could start something that could address the issues and items that are on the table right now regarding this transition. And, frankly, I don't know if it'll work. I just know that I think there are some major opportunities here, and part of that opportunity set is laying out, let's say, a path with breadcrumbs that leads to something that's got something available for as many people as possible. And that's all we're doing here, is sort of like setting out breadcrumbs that, hey, give this little piece a try. If it looks interesting, looks like it could be an opportunity for your particular set of interests, then pick up the next one. And you don't have to go any farther down the trail. You can stop at any time. And in fact, it's set up so you can take whatever you've done and go off on a different fork in the road. So I don't know. all I know, Mark, is this. There have been some major companies over the last decade that have had their business models basically completely disrupted in short order.
Right.
I used to be a securities broker, a stockbroker. And if I had told people that, hey, if I'd told my client base, hey, in a few years Kodak will be gone, Polaroid will be gone, digital equipment will be gone, IBM will be out of the mainframe business for the most part, they would have thought I was crazy. And, to have said that about BlackBerry or RIM a few years ago, same thing. To say that about Nokia, to say that about, other companies. I mean, I could go on down the list. No, it's my understanding that since like 2004 or 5, Nokia spent something more than $10 billion in research and development. And they've had their business handed to them by Apple. And now we're seeing even smaller initiatives completely disrupt, major legacy business models. And you don't have to look any farther than Skype, or now in the world of text messaging, WhatsApp. In a 4-year time span, WhatsApp, I think that's less than 30 people in their company, has in short order completely disrupted the text messaging market. And now they've got voice in their crosshairs. So it does seem like a quixotic endeavor here to think that, some little nucleus of people could put out on the table something that would be attractive to major companies, to major parties and interests, which includes the regulatory realm. So, I guess that's my view of this. And having spent, over a decade within the realm of the regulatory bodies and the, major companies trying to create something here, I'm convinced that there is an opportunity to put something out that is attractive. What do you hear in that, Mark? And if you don't want to comment, that's fine.
Yeah, it's a speculative environment, and I certainly wouldn't question any approach that's used. It's just peculiar to look into the future and have all sorts of ideas and money in our pockets, and understand that we have to do something, and be as unclear on how we take those steps as we are right now. It's just a peculiar time in communications, I guess.
Agreed.
So it does provide an opening. If there was a clear path, if there was an industry consensus, if there was a regulatory mandate, there would be less opportunity.
Right. Okay. Thanks. All right, so let's go on to the sponsored registrars. The sponsored registrars, we're proposing a set of 20. We are proposing a set of 25 commercial registrars for the initial phase of PhoneWar.org, and then a community of 25 sponsored registrars that will pay a token dollar per month to participate as a workshop fee as a sponsored registrar. And they also will have, they can participate in the third and the fourth Wednesday workshops as registrars. Their commitment is simply month to month, and they get an API to the registry. And this is really designed to attract a community of academic research, nonprofit participants, perhaps regulatory participants. And that's the initial community that we're looking to create, is a combination of commercial interests and, let's say, academic research and nonprofit interests that can work together as registrars to create and test and together. And even though they're separate entities, the registrars, and they're welcome to work on proprietary elements that they think can give them a competitive advantage. The idea here is, hey, if somebody from, let's say, the University of Michigan can create something around the registrar functionality and the software and the platform, why keep that to them? Why not share it among the entire registrar community so that there is a collaboration, there is a cooperation as much as possible, yet there's also an opportunity to create distinctive elements that can be commercialized for the commercial registrars. So, to harken back to your point, Mark, about, there's been numerous years where the industry participants, the regulatory participants have tried to work and create, platforms and functionality. I would say, for the most part, hasn't really gone anywhere. The Country Code 1 Enum LLC that I was a member of spent a lot of time and effort, and I think it was sincere effort, to really create something using the Enum standards and protocols. And yet,
we've been talking about Enum development, I think, at least 7 years in industry and regulatory discussions. With all sincerity, people within my company have said it's coming, it's coming. And here we are today with no more of an Enum model than we really had 7 years ago.
Right.
But I think to the very beginning of what you said, which I think is something that telephone heads have to begin grasping, that a quote phone number that's not connected to the phone network, which is an anomaly all by itself, contradiction for most of us with TDM brains, that it can exist in an electronic environment, in a internet format, and provide so much more functionality than it does captive in a central office switch setting. So it's an intriguing possibility if you can throw off the shackles of all the TDM appendages and constraints. And that's the hardest thing that I've seen in this whole discussion, is to look at my industry peers and my workmates at AT&T and get them to agree that we have to do things vastly different with regards to the things that we routinely connect to a telephone number.
I agree. And having, talked about enum for over a decade, and having it in my head that this should be completely obvious to people, what I've discovered is it's not obvious. And the perception of a phone number is so ingrained in people, and they're so comfortable with it, and the idea of a phone call is so familiar that to try to communicate with slide shares, presentations, hand waving, whatever, anything short of somebody picking up a smartphone or a tablet and dialing something they think is a telephone number and then having a new experience, anything short of that, for 99% of the time, doesn't communicate anything. And that is part of what we're intending to do here with phoneword.org, is actually have some real tangible elements that people can use and demonstrate. And that's about the only way that many of the things that we're now becoming accustomed to, the value proposition can be communicated. I mean, just to go off on a little bit of a tangent, but not really, if you tried to describe the value proposition around a smartphone or an iPad without having seen one or used one, it just doesn't connect.
Right.
And the same thing with Twitter. I mean, there are people to this day that do not get Twitter. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that same thing with Facebook. If you'd never used Facebook and you said, hey, there's going to be this new thing called Facebook, and people are going to be posting about their, what they had for breakfast and yada yada, and it's going to be this huge revolutionary platform, people think you're nuts.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just to visualize it, which I know we're about at the end of the hour, and I've got another appointment to attend to, but if you can get us to visualize what you're proposing, then it can begin to take root. Mm-hmm. But until I had an iPhone of my very own, I didn't understand what they meant on those TV commercials about these apps. I just didn't, until I held it in my hand, I couldn't perceive it. That's what I think can happen out of this testbed environment. But I think what you're talking about doing is upstaging that with, products or technology that's usable today, not just testable today.
Yes.
And that, that may ostracize you because people can't handle it, but it gives you an opportunity to actually drive business. Mm-hmm. Because the testbed concept is really just driving concepts now. It's driving prototypes, or it will. It's not there yet. But in any case, it's an exciting time, and you've got to pick the path that you'll take to get to your goal. And so it's an intriguing opportunity, I think, that you put forth.
Cool.
Hey,
Thank you.
Could I ask a question here?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is for Mark. So first off, I want to say we've got some kind of technical proposals for what the registry service should do, and you know, looks like we're not getting to that in this meeting, but you know, join us for the next meeting, and we can definitely go through and give a fuller explanation of what it is we're actually intending to do there. Just from your perspective, or you know, from my looking at this stuff, it looks like the registry service is really pretty straightforward. It's very well described by specs, and could essentially be a commodity service from a technical perspective. So I wanted to get a sense that is your focus mainly on the policy side of things? Is that the main barrier to adoption? And if so, what sort of qualities within the policy would be necessary to get adoption?
I probably can't think that big.
Okay.
That's a lot of that's a lot to cranialize. You know, some of the concepts that we've talked about as a future environment for numbering, and this is not, Brandon, I don't think it's much service related as you and Jay do, because I'm sort of in the middle of the beast, doing numbering as a concept, but not as a provisioning tool, or not as a service rollout. So it's interesting, Jay, you said talking about doing things on the edge, and I'm so far in the middle of the organism that it's hard from here, Brandon, to successfully talk about something that really ends up being kind of drives the service, drives the product. I tend to think more in terms of how to unencumber the macro things that we have today that overhang telephony, central office, central office switch-based locations and routing of numbers, and those kinds of legacy things that are replete within the network.
So you want to be able to transfer and utilize. You want to be able to utilize the existing networks and have a transition plan from all the infrastructure that you have now. That's really the whole purpose of enum is to start to bring that existing network into the digital realm.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you, and I think when we look at enum, we say, aha, here is a tool that we can use to get us towards that less encumbered, that modern network, and get us to where the services will fall out the way that Jay is describing. But I think it's interesting what part of what you're talking about, and again, I got a appointment I need to leave for in about a minute, but I'll just say in closing that there's a different network waiting for us 6 or 8 years from now. But there are business opportunities now that don't have to rely strictly on the current structure in the transition, in the interim. So I think it's confusing when I talk to people in the telephone environment. They think of what they do today and how do they transition that into this end product, but a lot of what they need to do is transition to a bridge device. Because what we're going to do for the next 3 years or 4 years or 5 years is going to be 1 foot in TDM and 1 in IP. And we're not going to get into the holy land of all IP in the next 3 or 4 years. So
Right.
actually some of what you two are talking about is more likely to be bridge devices, and there's a business opportunity in that transition. So I think there's hope in the transition for products. What I have to do within my company is to help people understand that we have this model for years from now, that we have to put some things in place today that will enable it, and then we can look at the transitioning model for us in the interim. But a lot of it depends on what the final model is going to look like, and we don't yet know what that is. So it's hard for us to design our transitioning mechanisms. Anyway,
Yeah. And I think our main goal is really to get a registry service set up in a testbed environment, so we can actually push that discussion forward with real implementations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think without having something that we can touch, it's hard for the telephone heads to start moving towards that ultimate thing. And if you wait for the ultimate thing to be designed, your revenue stream is so far out in the future that it's probably a challenge to keep the business afloat. So there is an opportunity in the interim tool that points to the future if you can come up with it. But with that, I'm going to drop off and go to another appointment.
Thanks, Mark.
Pleasure
Thanks,
talking
Mark.
all today.
And the last slide is what do you want? And we'll just leave that. Oh, there he goes. So, okay. So, Brandon,
Do you want to take this offline and we'll talk some more?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was a great conversation, and I think that sets the stage for our next workshop on the 23rd at 5 p.m. Eastern, which is, I believe, 9 p.m. GMT. So we'll go ahead and finish today's session. And do you have any final comments, Brandon?
No, I think I'm excited to get into the technical discussion of it, and it sounds like Mark is too. So yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, we'll wrap this session up. The workshop, we did have it scheduled for 2 hours, but I think this was a good, solid hour, and I think this sets the stage for our future workshops on April 23rd, and then in May. You can see the schedule at www.phoneword.org. So if you'd like to be part of the mailing list, please email jcarpenter@phoneword.org. That's JAYCARPENTER, and all this information is on the contact tab at www.phoneword.org. And I do request you put on the www because for some reason the domain is not quite resolving consistently without that www.phoneword.org. So I want to thank everybody that might be watching this on the website, on YouTube, on the Google Hangouts. We're going to repeat this format. And if you have any questions, comments, whatever, please contact us. You can also follow us on Twitter at PhoneWordORG, and we'll have some other communication avenues up and running soon. So thank you everyone for joining us. Bye.
Cool.